Man, I tell you, I am so freaking stupid. Oh God, just holy crap, I'm gonna burn the car down. You know, this has been a pretty interesting project. I've been learning a lot along the way here. The problem is I'm learning the expensive way. Did not realize there was such complexity in terms of different types of ignition systems until I started doing this. So at this point, you're probably asking yourself, well, what did you do wrong, Kirk? I thought you were making good progress and everything was fine, and everything was not fine. Remember in the last video, I ended up stating, like, once I got spark and everything, that the car was like trying to fire, but it wasn't actually firing. Well, what I ended up doing was I pulled out my spark plugs, I checked them, come to find out, cylinders 1 and 4 weren't getting anything. They were wet with fuel, but there was no carbon buildup, there was no sign of combustion whatsoever. And cylinders 2 and 3, those were black, the spark plugs were black. So there was combustion happening in those cylinders. So obviously that tells me my fuel injectors are good in all cylinders, but only 2 are getting spark. The big thing is the way these spark systems work, or this coil pack, the cylinders are paired. So 1 and 4 are paired together and 2 and 3 are paired together. So, and they just alternate, and that's how that works. So obviously one pair is not receiving spark. After doing some investigation, I realized that I didn't have the coil wired up properly. So here comes the interesting part. The reason why I had the coil wired improperly was because I was following instructions given to me for the Summit Racing ignition box. It's not that it's this device's fault at all, and or the directions for giving me wrong directions. The problem is, this is the wrong device altogether. This is the wrong part altogether for this type of ignition system, and I did not know better. And what makes this even more exciting and annoying and expensive, so once I realized how the coil was supposed to be wired, once I realized what I did wrong, then I went ahead and I decided to wire it up in the way that is supposed to be done. And well, so I thought. So I changed some things around. I twisted a couple different wires together and, you know, started cranking the ignition, see if I would get anything. I pulled out my spark checker here and I started probing all the wires, and I'm like, oh yeah, that one's got spark. Oh, that one's got spark. Man, that one's got a lot of spark. Well, so does that one too. I'm like, well, 2 of them have a lot of spark and the other 2s don't have so much, but they got spark. I'm like, why isn't this working? Like, okay, maybe if I change one thing around. I changed one wire. I changed one wire, and that was the worst thing I could have done.
And at this moment, Kirk knew he had up.
I'm just sitting here cranking away on the car. Nothing. Nothing. Make some changes on Tuner Studio. Nothing. I'm like, what is going on? I don't get it. And all of a sudden, out of my peripheral vision, because I'm staring down at the laptop, I see this like steam coming up from the engine bay. And I'm like, that's weird. Makes adjustments. Nothing. And then that steam starts turning into a more steady cloud of smoke. And I look up and I'm like, oh God. I'm like, just getting out of the car real quick, and I'm running up here, and the freaking coil is just blowing out smoke like crazy. I'm like, holy crap, I'm gonna burn the car down. And I'm just like, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm just like sitting here snatching wires, trying to disconnect the coil from power. And I didn't even turn the ignition off on the car, so the whole car's got power, and the coil was just blowing like the steady stream of like sparks and white smoke out this way. It got so bad. Oh my God. And needless to say, I destroyed this coil. So let's do some damage control and take a look here and see exactly what I did. It's not nearly as bad as it could have been, but I know not to do it again. As you can see here, the coil just cracked open all right here. And this is when I guess all the pressure building inside of it or something. I don't know exactly what happened or whatever, but all I know is it was just shooting out smoke. I mean, look what it did here. I mean, this is actually crap. I think that, oh man, look, it just cooked my brake reservoir. Look at that. I had that all cleaned up. Now look at it. That's annoying. And it cooked one of the wires from the harness onto my spark plug wire, which I think it's fine. I think all of the spark plug wires are fine. It got a little hot here. You know, this wire completely melted onto it, but I think the wire's fine. I hope so, because I didn't want to have to spend more money on replacement spark plug wires. But as far as I know, I think they're fine. The coil, completely toast. Not going to work. Like I said, you know, you got two different sides or two different pairs. You know, this was the 2 and 3 and this was 1 and 4. And as you can see, 2 and 3 was a little on the hot side. The thing that was really wrong altogether was the wiring wasn't right to begin with, like in terms of signal output from the microsquirt to the ignition box. So I'm going to take the coil off and I'm just going to quickly explain. Those who actually know what they're doing will know exactly what I'm doing, what I'm going to do, and what I did wrong. And those who don't know can learn from my mistakes and hopefully not do what I did and spend all the money that I did. Here is everything off the car. As you can see, the coil, I mean, it cracked all the way down here. You can see a crack here, goes all the way up. Looks like it stops there and it stops there. So I don't know, I guess maybe electricity escaped through the coil and it just arced. I don't know. I don't really know what caused this. All I know, it was really bad and somewhat scary, and I don't want to do it again. That's all I know. This is the big thing here. Okay, so right here you have 3 wires. It was my understanding that because the way the ignition box work, you know, it's made to be used with a single coil. Okay, that's it. A single coil, because then that coil sends the signal to a distributor, and the distributor does exactly what it says it does. Distributes the spark. This is 4 coils in one. So there was a specific way this was supposed to be done, and I didn't know better. So I thought this was a ground, and or one of these was a ground, and like there was a coil positive, coil negative. That's what I ended up doing. I was completely wrong. What happened was this was coil positive here, and coil positive on this side was fine because I was operating this side of the coil from this wire. The problem was it wasn't operating this side because this was getting the wrong type of signal on this wire. The way this is really supposed to be wired. So the microsquirt has 2 different ignition outputs. From all the things I was reading, I was only going to be using the one, but this is where I misunderstood things, because I was only using one ignition output. There was only one wire from the microsquirt going to the ignition box. So that was mistake number 1. I needed to use both ignition outputs because one side of the coil, which is literally this pair here, gets run by one ignition output, and then this pair here gets run by another ignition output, and all these are just grounds. These are literally grounds, and I did not know that. So obviously all the microsquirt does is just ground this or that, and this is your power wire, 12 volts, that carries your power. So ground, fire, ground, fire. Yes, that's how it's supposed to work. But considering I only had power going to one wire, only one side of the coil was working the way it should have. So that was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, using the Summit Racing box. As far as I know, it seems to be a pretty solid product. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with it. I'm not saying it caused my issues. However, being that it was not for this ignition setup, obviously that's going to create issues. You don't have to or need to or should at all use these type of ignition boxes for this type of ignition setup. You do, however, and you should use what's called a coil driver. And I learned that. So, a coil driver is exactly what this thing is that was right on the factory car. So it's just to control the signal from the computer to the coil pack. I didn't know that. I didn't know I needed it. I thought, you know, doing it this way was eliminating the need of any type of ignition module altogether. I thought this was my ignition module. That's not my ignition module. With all of that said, I did get a new coil and I did get a coil driver. And I got all of that once again through DIYautotune.com. And please just do yourself a favor. If you are doing any type of custom work like this with the micro squirts or the mega squirts or whatever, I know there are a lot of other websites. I've been really happy with you know, the products and the information that goes along with the products directly on their website, DIYautotune.com. I've been very happy with all of that. Just do yourself a favor. Do not go and just mismatch parts. If you know you're upgrading the ignition system, buy the components that they sell on their website, because all these parts are you know, they're tested to work and be compatible with each other. So if you buy all the parts through them, chances are you're going to mitigate possible, you know, part incompatibility, because you know it's going to work, you know it's been tested to work. And yes, do yourself a favor and do that. So that's what I ended up doing again, is I ordered their ignition 4, it was like, you know, IGN-4 whatever coil pack, which is the same type of coil pack like this. There's that, and they sell like a really nice, you know, coil driver that works with the micro squirt. You know, it's made to work with all that. It's literally all is, from my understanding, you take those two different ignition outputs, you wire it to it. There's some ground wires you wire, and then you just feed the coil, you know, switch 12 volt, and that's it. And theoretically, it should work. So far, everything's been working fine. Like the Hall effect sensor in the wheel works great. I get a nice consistent RPM signal now in the micro squirt. So like all of that's working fine. And see, a lot of this I have been reading on their website. They have like a whole tech section, which goes through a lot of different scenarios and stuff with all this. So, but then there's also the whole micro squirt and mega squirt websites too that give you a lot of information, and there is so much information. But this is why I find that it's very important, if you're doing these setups, to get everything through DIY Autotune, because they have very important stuff that they give through each product that you probably wouldn't know about, especially if it's your first time doing it, or if you know, maybe you're just not super, maybe you've done ignition systems, you know, but you're not super familiar with tuning them. So like one big thing, and I thought this was a really cool thing that they did, because I would have not have known better, and I probably would have fried their coil too, is they actually tell you what settings you need to make in Tuner Studio for their products. And for their coil, it tells you exactly the dwell that you should set, and no higher. Like, I think they said no higher than like 3.5 milliseconds. Yeah, you don't want your coil exceeding 8 amps of draw, which I didn't know that, because at that point you can have coil failure. I never knew these things, but it says right on the project page on their website, and I thought that was brilliant. You know, it just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, because I never knew there were such complexities. You know, I thought a coil is a coil, a spark plug is a spark plug. You put this into that and that into this, and then boom, fire. You know, that's what you get. Just like anything with a car. Like, once you get outside of the basics, man, whew, you talk about some seriously complex engineering. I'm not wearing a hat today, but if I did, I would take it off, because for all those engineers who make these vehicles, you know, it's crazy. It's crazy all the different tiny little details that you would never even think about goes into, and the decisions that happen that they make when they are designing and developing these vehicles and these systems. It's really mind-boggling what goes into these cars. Seriously. I think I've said this like literally every video I've made along the way here. I'm like, hopefully if we get these next parts, we'll have a running car. But no, seriously, you know, this was basically the main issue all along. Like, I'm not happy that I spent the money, but I'm really happy because I've learned all this stuff. You know, you can't put a price on knowledge. You really can't, unless you're at college, and then you can. for the most part, you can't put a price on knowledge. That means so much to me. There's absolute tremendous value in that, and more than I could or would be willing to pay for. The little extra money I've wasted on these different components that I didn't need is really worth more than everything teaching me about ignition systems in cars, because I did not know. Did not at all. Shouldn't have any more issues. I really shouldn't. At least I hope so. God, I hope so. For the sake of my bank account, at least. They can't take it no more, man. They really can't. Not at all. Sadly, though, there is a slight delay in this next batch of parts because the manufacturer does the coils or whatever. You know, they're a little bit slow in production, so it's going to take a little extra time until they can ship one out, which is fine. It's only gonna be like an extra week or two. But until then, there's not much more I can really do with this. So, you know, this is gonna be put on a little bit of a hiatus for a few weeks until things get settled out, and then I'll have more content coming up on the Fox here. So, you know, just keep a lookout for the next videos, and shouldn't be too long, hopefully. But that is it for this video. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and if you want to see more content like this, then go ahead, subscribe to the channel, keep a lookout for the next video.